Who came first, the Kanuri or the Hausa? It's a question that has sparked debates for generations. Some believe the Hausa are the oldest people of northern Nigeria. Others argue that the Kanuri built one of Africa's greatest empires long before many Hausa kingdoms became powerful. But what does history actually tell us? Today, we're separating myths from historical evidence to uncover which people settled first, how their civilizations developed, and why both groups became giants of northern Nigeria history. Let's journey back more than 1,000 years. Long before Nigeria existed as a country, the region around Lake Chad was already home to thriving communities. Archaeological discoveries show that people had been living around Lake Chad for thousands of years. The fertile land, abundant fish, and access to water made it one of the earliest centers of human settlement in the Sahel. The ancestors of today's Kanuri people emerged in this region. Over centuries, they developed organized societies that eventually formed the powerful Kanem Kingdom, which historians generally date to around the 9th century CE. By the 11th century, Kanem had become a major political and commercial power, and later evolved into the Kanem-Bornu Empire. At roughly the same time, farther west, the ancestors of the Hausa people were establishing communities across what is now northern Nigeria. These settlements gradually developed into the famous Hausa city-states, such as Kano, Katsina, Zaria, Gobir, Daura, Rano, and Biram. While many of these cities have earlier local traditions, written records indicate that they rose to prominence between the 10th and 15th centuries through trade, agriculture, and skilled craftsmanship. So, when comparing organized states rather than prehistoric inhabitants, the Kanem Kingdom appears in the historical record earlier than the fully developed Hausa states. The Kanuri did not simply establish villages, they built an empire. Kanem controlled trans-Saharan trade routes connecting West Africa with North Africa and the Mediterranean. Salt, horses, textiles, and other goods moved through its markets, bringing wealth and influence. One of the most important turning points came in the 11th century, when the rulers of Kanem embraced Islam. This strengthened diplomatic and commercial ties with the wider Islamic world and encouraged the growth of scholarship. Meanwhile, the Hausa city-states developed a different political system. Instead of one empire, there were several independent kingdoms. Each city had its own ruler, government, and economy, yet they shared closely related language, cultural traditions, and commercial networks. Cities like Kano and Katsina became famous centers of commerce, leatherwork, weaving, and Islamic learning. Rather than one civilization replacing the other, both grew into major regional powers with different political structures. If the question is about the earliest organized kingdom with strong historical documentation, many historians conclude that the Kanem Kingdom predates the rise of the major Hausa city-states. However, this does not mean that Hausa ancestors arrived later as people. Communities speaking early forms of Hausa had already been living in what is now northern Nigeria for centuries before the city-states reached their medieval prominence. In other words, both peoples have deep roots in the region. The difference is that the Kanuri established a large centralized kingdom earlier in the surviving historical record, while the Hausa developed multiple powerful city-states that flourished over time. This distinction is important because settlement history and state formation are not the same thing. As trade expanded across northern Nigeria, the Kanuri and Hausa became close neighbors and partners. Merchants traveled between Bornu and the Hausa cities. Islamic scholars exchanged ideas. Families intermarried. Political alliances formed. Ideas about governance, education, architecture, and commerce spread across the region. Although each people maintained its own language and identity, centuries of interaction created cultural links that remain visible today. Their shared history helped shape the development of northern Nigeria and influenced neighboring regions across West Africa. So, who came first? Based on current historical evidence, the Kanem Kingdom, founded by the ancestors of today's Kanuri people, emerged earlier than the mature Hausa city-states as an organized state. But this should not be interpreted as proof that one people is older than the other in every sense. Both the Kanuri and Hausa have ancient roots, rich cultures, and remarkable histories that have shaped West Africa for centuries. Rather than asking which people mattered more, history shows that both civilizations made extraordinary contributions to trade, scholarship, governance, and the spread of Islam across the region. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone interested in African history.